mark, we are approximately, we would have covered 3 volumes. We've got another 3 more plus another volume to go. So let's see how it goes. Okay, so I'll just recite prayers and then we'll start. Om Ajnanaatimirandasya Gnanjana Shlakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Yadadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsya. Shri Rupam Sagra Jatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sjivam. Sadvaitam Savadutam Harijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam. Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamusya. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prem Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Navine Gauratvase Namo Namaha. Namo Brahmani Devaya Go Brahmanitaya Jaditaya Krishna Govinda Namo Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopish Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanati Devi Brahmani Pre. Hukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Kritam Deshu Gunta Kritam De Paramananda Madhav Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Katanchana Smriti Sri Chaitanya. Okay, Rudradip Nimai Prabhu, could you share the screen? Where are we actually? Is that where we were?
Yes, Prabhuji.
I'm not able to look. All they put a bookmark here. It seems to be another place.
Prabhupada narrating the drama to Hayagriva Prabhuji.
We didn't finish that, is it?
We have not yet finished. Only one session is over. Because where Hayagriva Prabhu was not able to.
Okay, maybe I maybe I remember reading before or after the class. Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Should I read, Prabhu, then?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, Prabhu. At the next session, Hayagriva listened more carefully and the transcendental scenes came quickly, one after another. As Prabhupada described each scene, speaking the words and thoughts of Lord Chaitanya and his associates, Prabhupada seemed to be seeing the scenes enacted before him. He especially became moved when he spoke of Lord Chaitanya and Haridas Thakura. The life of Haridas Thakura, Prabhupada said, is that he was born in a Mohammedan family. Some way or other, he became a devotee and he was chanting 300,000 times, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made him the Acharya, the authority of chanting. Therefore, we glorify him. Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Because he was made the Acharya, the authority of chanting Hare Krishna. When Lord Chaitanya took sannyasa, Haridas Thakur decided, my dear Lord, you are leaving Navadvipa. Then what is the use of my life? Either you take me or let me die. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no, why shall you die? You come with me. So he took him to Jagannath Puri. In Jagannath Puri, because he considered himself born of a Mohammedan family, Haridasa did not enter the temple. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him a place at Kashinatha Mishra's house. There he was chanting, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was sending him prasadam. In that way, he was passing his days, and Chaitanya used to come and see him daily. Srila Prabhupada wanted a scene for the passing away of Haridas Thakura. Hayagriva, is this the same Haridas the Mohammedans threw into the river? Yes, Prabhupada said. Then why, then very casually, Hayagriva mused aloud. So he finally met his end there in the fifth scene. Prabhupada hesitated. Here again, Hayagriva revealed his lack of transcendental knowledge, talking as though Haridasa's passing away was the same as an ordinary man's meeting his end. All right. Hayagriva cued him. What is this particular incident? Prabhupada. The particular incident is significant. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a Brahmana and he was a sannyasi. According to social custom, he should not even touch a Mohammedan. But this Haridas Thakura was a Mohammedan, and yet at his death, he took the body himself and danced. And he put him in the graveyard and distributed prasadam. Because Haridasa was a Mohammedan, he did not enter the temple of Jagannath Puri because the Hindus were very strict. Haridasa was a devotee, but he thought, why should I create some row? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appreciated Haridasa's humble behavior. Although he had become a devotee, he was not forcibly going to the temple. But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself was daily coming and seeing him. While going to take bath in the sea, he will first of all see Haridasa. Haridasa, what are you doing? Haridasa will offer his respect and he will sit and talk for some time. Then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will go and take his bath. In this way, one day when he came, he saw Haridasa not feeling very well. Haridasa, how is your health? Yes, sir. It's not very. After all, it is the body. Then the third day, he saw that Haridasa is going to leave his body today. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, Haridasa, what do you desire? Both of them could understand. Haridasa said that this is my last stage. If you kindly stand before me. Srila Prabhupada became caught in the intense spiritual emotions of the scene, as if it were happening before him. He closed his eyes. He stopped talking. Then he began again slowly, haltingly. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stood before him and he left his body. Prabhupada sighed and became silent. Hayagriva sat staring at the floor. When he glanced up, he saw that Swamiji was crying. Prabhupada quickly summed up a few last scenes and ended his outline. Now you write, he told Hayagriva, and I shall make some addition or alteration. This is the synopsis and framework. Now you can proceed. Hayagriva left the room. The material was lengthy, and whether he would ever write the play was doubtful. But he was thankful to have received this special discourse. Shall I continue, Prabhu?
Yes, Madhuri, please go ahead.
Yes. Sitting on a bridge table in the student lounge, chanting into a little microphone while his followers played their instruments, Prabhupada began the Kirtana at Stanford University. At first, there were about 20 students, but gradually more entered the lounge and gathered around. Everyone was chanting. Then suddenly, the lounge became transformed as more than 200...
It's lounge.
Lounge, okay. Lounge became transformed as more than 200 Stanford students, most of them completely new to the Hare Krishna mantra, danced and chanted with as much enthusiasm as the most uninhibited Haight-Ashbury crowd. Prabhupada led the Kirtana for more than an hour. In his talk afterwards, he explained that what they had all just experienced. This Hare Krishna dance is the best process for getting out of this illusion that I am this body. Our society is trying to distribute to the world the priceless gift of the Lord. You did not understand the words, but you still felt the ecstasy to dance. Prabhupada took questions from the audience. Everything proceeded in a standard fashion until someone asked whether college students should respond to the military draft. Prabhupada replied that since they had elected their own government, there was no use complaining if the government told them to go to war. But some of the students, the same students who had chanted and danced only minutes before, began to shout, "No, no." Prabhupada tried explaining this point, but they raised their voices in anger until the hall became a bedlam of shouting. Finally, Srila Prabhupada picked up his kartalas and began chanting again, and the dissenters left. The next day, the Palo Alto Times ran a front page story with headlines and photo of the Kirtana. Ancient trance dance features Swami's visit to Stanford. Hold on there a minute. All you with it, people. There is a new dance about to sweep the country. It's called the Swami. It's going to replace the frog, Watusi, swim, and even the good old barnstorm. Why? Because you can do any old step to it and at the same time find real happiness. You can rid yourself of the illusion that you and your body are inseparable. The chant started quietly but gained volume as more people joined in. After half an hour, a long haired youth with 3 strings of red beads around his neck stood up and began to dance to the music. He closed his eyes in ecstasy and held his palms up shoulder high. 2 girls soon followed him. One had a string of bells around her neck. A bearded fellow with a fluorescent pink skull cap joined in, still beating on his tambourine. The Swami cut in a microphone in front of him, and the added volume provoked others to chant and stomp more loudly. A pretty girl in a sari danced as if in a hypnotic trance. A short, dark man, neatly dressed in suit and tie, threw off his shoes and joined in. A young math professor did likewise. A pretty blonde 3-year-old girl rocked and swayed in one corner. Suddenly, most of the audience was dancing and chanting. The pace grew faster and faster. Faces streamed with sweat. The temperature soared. Then it all stopped. Srila Prabhupada was pleased with the article and asked for more photocopies of it. What are they calling the dance? He laughed. The Swami? Across the top of the Kirtana photo, he typed, "Everyone joins in complete ecstasy when Swami Bhaktivedanta chants his hypnotic Hare Krishna." The devotees got Prabhupada an engagement at a YMCA where the audience consisted almost entirely of children. The devotees had decorated the hall with posters of Krishna and had hung a big sign with the Maha Mantra on it. The children chanted along with Prabhupada during Kirtana. Just before the lecture, Guru Dasa reminded him, maybe the talk should be simple since they are all between 9 and 14 years old. Prabhupada nodded silently. Is there a student here who is intelligent? Prabhupada began. No one responded. After a moment, a 12-year-old boy, urged by his teachers and fellow students, raised his hand. Prabhupada motioned for him to come forward. The boy wore thick glasses, short pants, and a blazer, and his hair was combed back very neatly. Pointing to the boy's head, Prabhupada asked, "What's that?" The boy almost scoffed at the simpleness of the question. "My head." Prabhupada then pointed to the boy's arm and asked quietly, "What is that?" "My arm," the boy said. Prabhupada then questioned to the boy's foot, "What is that?" My food. The boy answered, still looking incredulous. Yes, Srila Prabhupada said, you say this is my hand, my arm, my foot, my body. But where are you? The boy stood perplexed, unable to answer Prabhupada's simple question. We say my hand, Srila Prabhupada continued. But who is the owner of my hand? We may say my hand. So that means someone owns my hand. But where does the owner live? I do not say I hand. I say my hand. So my hand and I are different. I am within my body and you are within your body. But I am not my body and you are not your body. We are different from the body. Real intelligence means to know who I am. Haight-Ashbury's psychedelic shop, a popular hippie gathering place, had extended to Prabhupada many invitations to come and speak. After the mantra rock dance, the hippies there had put a sign in the window, a night of consciousness. Also, in response to the mantra rock dance, they had opened a meditation room in the rear of their store. But since the hippies at the psychedelic shop were almost always intoxicated, Prabhupada's followers had said that it wouldn't be a good idea for Prabhupada to go. But the hippies kept entreating. Finally, the devotees relented, advising Prabhupada it might be all right for him to go. So one Saturday night, Prabhupada and two devotees walked over to Head Street to the psychedelic shop. Young people crowded the streets. Hippies sitting along the sidewalk selling hashish pipes and other dope paraphernalia, homosexuals, wildly costumed hippies with painted faces, small groups of smoking marijuana, drinking, singing, and playing guitars, a typical evening on Head Street. At the psychedelic shop, marijuana and tobacco smoke hung heavy in the air, mingling with the smell of alcohol and bodies. Prabhupada entered the meditation room, its ceiling and walls covered with madrasas, and sat down. The room was full of hippies, many lying down, heavily intoxicated, looking up at him with half-closed eyes. He spoke in a low voice, but his presence somehow held their attention. Although lethargic, the group was appreciative, and after Prabhupada had finished, those who were still conscious expressed their approval. Continue, Prabhu.
Well, just a few minutes, Mataji. I just want to say a few things.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. We see how when Srila Prabhupada narrated the story of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri. Earlier, when he was narrating, we saw how he said how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he would dance in front of the carts, he would say jug, jug, jug. He could not even complete the phrases jug, jug, jug. So here when he narrates the pastime of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, offering benediction to Haridas Thakur, standing before him when he left his body, so Prabhupada goes into ecstasy. This is the nature of the associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They're immersed in the ocean of ecstasy. So that was very often manifest when Srila Prabhupada spoke about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. Although he restrained himself, but still devotees could glimpse how ecstatic Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates are. So Prabhupada was an associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and who came to continue his pastimes. So we are in the extended pastime of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it is natural that when he remembers Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he goes into a trance-like state. I mean, I use the word trance because We are reading so much about the word trance today. And if we notice, one thing I did notice here was that Prabhupada had this ability to communicate spiritual truths to any given audience, So it is also, although it is an audience of children, still Prabhupada knew exactly how to convey the message of Krishna consciousness to his audience. And in this Haight Ashbury psychedelic shop, one thing that really stands out is Prabhupada's kindness, Prabhupada's compassion, Prabhupada's kindness. He could have just refused to go there. But since they were entreating him, since they kept inviting him, Prabhupada just conceded and went out to give out his mercy. Yes, Manju, can you go ahead?
Yes, Prabhupada. On Saturday, April 1st, near the end of his stay in San Francisco, Prabhupada accepted an invitation from Love Gottlieb, head of Morning Star Ranch, a nudist hippie commune. Morning Star was a bunch of young people living in the woods. The devotees explained to Prabhupada. The hippies there had spiritual aspirations. They grew vegetables and worshipped the sun. They would hold hands and listen to the air. And naturally, they were involved in lots of drug taking and free sex. When Love came in the morning to pick up the Swami, they talked and Prabhupada gave him a Rasgulla, a sweet made of bite-sized balls of curd simmered in sugar water. After a few minutes together in Prabhupada's room, they started for Morning Star, 60 miles north of San Francisco. Love Gottlieb. I told Swamiji to fasten his safety belt. He said no. He said Krishna will handle it or something. So on the way out, I was showing off all my vast erudition in having read a biography of Ramakrishna. That's when Bhaktivedanta gave the best advice to the aspirant I ever heard. We were talking about Ramakrishna and Vivekananda and Aurobindo and this and that. So he said, you know, putting the gentle hand on my knee, when you have found your true path, all further investigation of comparative religion is merely sense enjoyment. Situated in a forest of redwoods, more than 200 feet tall, Morning Star Ranch occupied what had once been an egg farm. Some of the land had been cleared for farming. There were a few tents, some unsubstantial little huts, a couple of tree houses, but the only decent insulated building was Love's place, an old chicken house. The commune had about 100 full-time members, with the number of residents rising to as many as 300 on the weekends in warm weather, when people would come out to work in the garden or just walk around naked and get high. Prabhupada arrived at 1 in the afternoon on a beautiful sunny day. He first wanted to rest, so Love offered his own house. Walking to Love's place, Prabhupada noticed a few nude men and women hoeing in garden. One of the workers, a short, stocky young man, Herbie Bresak, stopped his work in the garden and came to greet the Swami. Herbie, Love Gottlieb introduced us. We were planting potatoes at the time. He said, this is Swami Bhaktivedanta. I came out of the garden and shook Swamiji's hand. I said, hello Swami. He asked me, what are you doing? I told him that I was just planting potatoes. He then asked me what I was doing with my life. I didn't answer. After resting for a few minutes, Prabhupada was ready for the kirtana. He and Love went to a hilly pasture where the hippies had placed a wooden seat for Prabhupada before a bower of wild flowers arranged like a bandshell. Prabhupada took his seat and began chanting. The commune members, all of whom had been anticipating the Swami's visit, gathered eagerly for the group meditation. Mike Morrissey. Some people had clothes on, some people didn't. Some were dancing around, but Swamiji wasn't looking at our bodies. He was looking at our souls and giving us the mercy we needed. The Kirtana was well received. One of the members of the commune was so enthralled by the Kirtana that he decided to put on his clothes and go back to San Francisco with the Swami. Prabhupada spoke very briefly and then he prepared to leave, shaking hands and exchanging courtesies as he walked to the car. Although Srila Prabhupada hadn't spoken much philosophy, his Kirtana left a deep impression on the hippies at Morning Star. While leaving, he had told one of the young men, "Keep chanting this Hare Krishna mantra here." And they did. Love Gottlieb. The Swami was an extremely intelligent guy with a job to do. There was no sanctimony or holy pretension. None of that. Eyes lifted silently to the sky. All I remember is just a very pleasant, incredibly safe feeling. There is no doubt that the Maha Mantra, once you get the mantra into the head, it's there. It never stops. It's in the cells. It awakens the DNA or something. Shortly thereafter, half of the people at Morning Star got seriously into chanting. Those that did were extremely sincere God seekers. Their aspiration was 1,000% sincere, considering the circumstances in which they were found. They were all dopers, that's for sure, but they definitely uh, that gave that up once they got in touch with the Maha Mantra. I'll continue, Prabhu. His topcloth wrapped loosely around his shoulders, Prabhupada stood a last moment by the open door of the car and looked back in farewell to the devotees and the storefront temple. It was no longer a mere storefront, but had become something worthy. New Jagannath Puri. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had asked him to come here. Who among his brothers could imagine how crazy these American hippies were, hallucinating on drugs, crying out, "I am God." So many girls and boys, unhappy, mad, despite their wealth and education. But now, through Krishna consciousness, some were finding happiness. The first day he had arrived, the reporter had.
Just stop there.
Yes,
Okay. First is that Morning Star Ranch, where Prabhupada went there. I don't know how many of you know, but it was from there that Srila Prabhupada got Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He was there living in that Morning Star Ranch. This is mentioned in his biography, his book called The Servant of the Servant. So you can find more details about Tamal Krishna Maharaj there in that book. So now Prabhupada is, after having spent his time in San Francisco, Prabhupada is now going back to New York. So, and before going, he names this place, not before going, I mean, he's leaving New Jagannath Puri. We saw that how Prabhupada named this place New Jagannath Puri, especially because the Jagannath, Baladev and deity, Subhadra deities were found there. They were carved very nicely, and they did a big Rath Yatra. Okay, Mats, please go ahead.
Yes. The first day he had arrived, the reporter had asked him why he had come to Haight-Ashbury. Because the rent is cheap, he had replied. His desire was to spread the movement of Lord Chaitanya. Why else would he have come to such a dilapidated little storefront to live next to a Chinese laundry and digger's free store? The reporters had asked if he were inviting the hippies and bohemians to take to Krishna consciousness. Yes, he had said, everyone. But he had known that once joining him, his followers would become something different from what they had been before. Now, the devotees were a family. If they followed his instructions, they would remain strong. If they were sincere, Krishna would help them. Lord Jagannatha was present, and the devotees would have to worship him faithfully. They would be purified by chanting Hare Krishna and following their spiritual master's instructions. Prabhupada got into the car, accompanied by some of his disciples, and a devotee drove him to the airport. Several carloads of devotees followed behind. At the airport, the devotees were crying, but Prabhupada assured them he would return if they would hold a Rathayatra festival. You must arrange a procession down the main street, he told them. Do it nicely. We must attract many people. They have such a procession yearly in Jagannath Puri. At this time, the deity may leave the temple. He would have to return, he knew, to tend the delicate devotional plants he had placed in their hearts. Otherwise, how could he expect these neophytes to survive in the ocean of material desires known as Haight-Ashbury? Repeatedly, he promised them he would return. He asked them to cooperate among themselves. Mukunda, Shamasundara, Gurudasa, Jayananda, Subala, Gaurasundara, Hayagriva, Haridasa, and the girls. Only 2.5 months ago, he had arrived here at this very terminal, greeted by a throng of chanting young people. Many were now his disciples, although just barely assuming their spiritual identities and vows. Yet, he felt no compunctions about leaving them. He knew that some of them might fall away, but he couldn't stay with them always. His time was limited. Srila Prabhupada, the father of two small bands of neophytes, tenderly left one group and headed east, where the other group waited in a different mood, a mood of joyful reception.
Okay, Mataji, I'm sorry because what happens is that my son plays this Prabhupada series by Yadubara Prabhu. So sometimes my memory is confused. We haven't had the first Rath Yatra here yet, in only in New Jagannath Puri. So because I was watching the videos that it corresponds to this period. So I thought that we already finished the Rath Yatra. The Prabhupada is saying that the next time he comes here, he could they could have the Rath Yatra. And yeah, one thing, I mean, I'm just trying to see how to phrase it. But Prabhupada was simultaneously very, very kind, compassionate, yet at the same time, he had this missionary spirit. So it's not that when he was in New York, he thought, okay, let me just go on here until everything becomes perfect. Or similarly, let me go on here in San Francisco until everything becomes perfect. But Prabhupada, as the pure devotee, he knew that he knew Krishna's mind. So when he felt that he had done sufficiently enough, he moved on to New York. Although he knew that it was not so sufficient that everybody would stay back. But he was, as Prabhupada wrote in the poem when he reached the shores of Boston, oh Lord, please make me dance. Please make me dance like a puppet in your hands. So Prabhupada is fully in tune with the plan of the Lord. One very interesting thing that we noticed throughout the Leelamrita is Prabhupada actually never sits down behind a desk and thinks, okay, the next 1 year I should do this, next 6 months I should do this. No 6-month plan, no 1 year plan, no 2 year plan, no 3 year plan, no 4 year plan, no 5 year plan, no strategic plan, nothing. Pure dependence on Krishna. And whatever Krishna reveals, he goes for it, he takes the opportunity and he builds on it. So this is the nature of a pure devotee. A pure devotee is every moment he is guided by the Supreme Lord, and he keeps his eyes, ears open. What does the Lord want to provide to me for his service? So Prabhupada is always in that mood. Okay, so we've come to the end of that chapter. So usually when we end the chapter, we have a brief question and answer session. So we'll go on to the next chapter, which is our master has not finished his work, which is a very, very intense and very it's a very intense chapter. Our master has not finished his work, which brings out the dedication and the love of Prabhupada's early disciples. Brings out that love, draws out that love, and the love features very prominently in this chapter. Our master has not finished his work. But before we go on to that, any questions, comments, reflections? Indulekha Mataji.
Yes,
Yeah.
Prabhuji, I want to just ask you, Prabhuji, like just now you told that Prabhupada is like he never is to plan or anything, or he just
That's
goes
correct.
on to the. Yes, Prabhuji. So
That's
what will be this one for us, Prabhuji? What is the guidance for us through this? Means how we should go about, like if any situation comes, can you just like guide us, Prabhuji, with that one? Like what we can infer from this or his Prabhupada's this, because he's a pure devotee, he's completely dependent on Krishna. We should be, but definitely I am not, for me, I am not that like this one, but not fully surrendered. So we get confused how to do and what to do and all. Generally, we do make plans. Definitely, we make plans. So how we can go about, bro?
Okay. If you ask this thing, I don't plan anything actually. Except, I mean, when I say I don't plan anything, I don't mean I don't mean in a blind sense. But what I meant is that it's possible to very much live without all these 1 year, 2 year, 5 year. And the moment I hear about all these 4-year plans, 5-year plans, 3-year plans, and strategic plans, I go to sleep. So what I meant is, okay, for example, let's say Prabhupada, okay? Prabhupada gave us ISKCON, and Prabhupada told the GBC that this movement will go on through intelligence and organization. Intelligence means to discriminate between what is right, what is wrong. So you get all that from Prabhupada's books. Organization, how? Organization means you need to put things together in a manner that's the most effective for spreading the Krishna conscious movement. That is called organization. Putting things together in the best possible manner to spread the Krishna conscious movement, to maintain and spread. No? So suppose we have a temple, example. You have a responsibility to run a temple. So you have to think how to do it in such a manner that the best comes out of that responsibility. You know, so before we get the temple, okay, so we can endeavor. Oh, Prabhupada wanted the preaching to spread. Okay, let me distribute books. Let me preach. If Krishna provides a nice facility, I'll take it. Right? That's how we're supposed to think. Not that, oh, no matter what happens, within 1 year I should build a temple. Prabhupada didn't think like that. If you notice, Prabhupada tried when he saw some houses, when he saw the initial days, or when he saw some houses, he writes to India, this will be a good place, all that. But when he saw that it's not happening, he just let it go. And he saw, okay, what is the next thing that Krishna is showing me? He goes with that. You know, so when he had something, he worked on it. But when he didn't have something, whatever came of its own accord, he tried to see if it can work. That's all. When he didn't have something, whatever came out of his own accord, he saw whether it would work. But when he had something, he would think how to best organize it for great results.
Yes. Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah, my this one is also not like 1 year plan or 2 year plan. Like this only we also plan. We want to do this, we want to do that, we'll do like this or something like that, Prabhuji. We plan like that, but sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen.
Yeah, Prabhupada used the expression, man proposes, God disposes.
Yes, Prabhuji. Like what happens sometimes is, Prabhuji, we plan, we put so much of endeavor in spiritual advancement or spiritual that work or seva, whatever, Prabhuji, but it doesn't materialize sometimes. I don't know for how long we can do. Should we try to complete it?
I give you
How?
an example.
Uh,
As they say,
yeah.
in devotees don't say devil lies in the details.
Yes.
For us, the angel lies in its details. So just give me a simple example, then I'll get an idea what
Yes,
you're
yes, Prabhuji. Like really, see, I was like doing the seva for a farm community like this one. So we wanted to develop that one, and I wanted to. Means I was like serving full time and all, but for many years it nothing happened because those things were not in my hand really. But I tried as far as possible how much I could do, but still that has not developed as much as really it was to be. So I was really feeling little bad because I also could not do much regarding that one.
Okay.
Because very less devotees over there, not many devotees for preaching or for doing any seva or work or anything. Hardly, I think 4. Now also there are only 4 devotees, that's all, not more than that. And very few congregation. And I don't know how, and maybe in future it might develop.
Okay, you made an attempt which Prabhupada wanted.
Yes, Prabhu.
Right. So you attempted something which Srila Prabhupada wanted.
Yes.
And if the attempt has not turned out to be successful, there are 2 reasons. Either it was not done properly or Krishna did not want it.
Yes.
So unless someone is in that situation or someone knows about it, they will not be able to, I will not be able to comment specifically what went wrong there, whether it was because you did not try enough or whether Krishna did not want it.
Yes.
You know,
I also want to know that answer, Prabhuji. I don't know whether my effort was less or that Krishna didn't want. I don't know, Prabhuji, about that one.
So you need to ask devotees who know about this project, who know you, what happened. So this requires some kind of a what do you call it? It needs to be looked into closely. What is going on?
Okay.
Something superior to you.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Spiritually advanced.
Yes.
The vision to see what is going on.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Roji.
Prabhuji, you said about this plan. Prabhupada had a mission or a goal, and which is why Prabhupada went to US. But obviously, Prabhupada, there are no short-term plans which he has not planned anything that today he has to do this tomorrow. But the long-term vision or the goal was very clear, and that cannot be implemented unless there is a plan behind it. So Prabhupada is very clear that these are the temples you need to focus and somehow complete within a deadline.
No. See, Prabhupada had a vision, but he did not have a plan for that. The plan makers in this material world, they have, okay, first we'll do this, then we'll do this, then we'll do that. This will lead to that, that will lead to this and all that, Like, for example, I'll give you a simple example. Now in Mayapur, we have so much land. There's a master plan team. There needs to be a master plan team because we have to decide how the land is going to be used. Not just the TO, Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. Okay, you have the structure there. What about all the land surrounding it? What plan has to be made? But we already have the land, or Prabhupada wanted a master plan. Okay, so we know that, okay, these are the elements which needs to be there, right? But that kind of planning is not a problem because that's something which goes with it, Like, for example, suppose we did not even have a land in Mayapur. What is the use of making a master plan? Like, for example, initially Prabhupada, when he tried to establish Mayapur, he had a lot of difficulties getting land in Mayapur. So at that time, he said that maybe we'll have our headquarters in Shantipur. So if you are in a situation where you don't even have land in Mayapur and you make a master plan for Mayapur, what sense does it make? It doesn't make any sense. So although the vision, Prabhupada is always clear. Vision is the instruction of the Guru, is itself the vision. Okay, but how to make it happen? He was open to see what Krishna is providing him with. He did not have any rigid, ironclad plans. That's the point. That's the point they're trying to make. He had a plan to have a world headquarters in Mayapur, but when his godbrothers were not cooperating, it was getting difficult for him to get land. He said, "Okay, let's establish our headquarters in Shantipur."
Fine, Prabhu. So whatever is coming in his way, he used to accept it. So whether if it happens or doesn't happen.
Correct. But his final, his the goal is very clear. My spiritual master has asked me to preach in the English-speaking world. And if in that Prabhupada memories, that DVD videos, I think it's called this Following Srila Prabhupada, the name of those, which Raghubara Prabhu has produced. So there is one place where I think it is Brahmananda. I don't know who recollects that, but yeah, I think it's Brahmananda Prabhu. Anyway, when Prabhupada was in front of Rukmini Dwarakadish, they had a small discussion in which Rukmini Dwarakadish ordered Prabhupada to go to India and preach. So Prabhupada came to India. He established Mayapur, Vrindavan, Delhi, and things like that. Delhi, Hyderabad, Mumbai. Anyway, he established these places. Why he did that? Because Rukmini Dwarakadish ordered him to come to India and do something in India. So the point is, it's not that Prabhupada, before going to the West, he said, okay, first I'll do this in New York, then I'll go here. After I succeed like this year, then I'll go there. Nothing, no, there's no such thing. He goes with his books. Whatever Krishna does for me, I will accept it. So like that, he's very, you could call it fully in tune with the desires of the Lord. This is exactly what it means to be a puppet in the hands of the Lord.
I get it, Prabhu. It's clear. Thank you, Prabhu.
Krishna Prabhuji, are you planning on continuing reading, or are we going to do your questions and answers? Because I will raise an issue accordingly, because it will turn into a debate. So I don't want to distract you for the rest of the session if you're planning to carry on reading.
Okay, now you've piqued my curiosity. So let's go on, and I look forward to your question at the end.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.
Mataji, Induleka Mataji, you can continue.
Yes, Prabhuji. There was.
Hold on. There is a Ila Madhuri Mataji as a question. Let's see what she has to say. Then we'll go on.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Mataji.
My small question doubt is, though things were not happening, Prabhupada had a direct instructions from his Guru Maharaj that he has to preach in Western countries. And
Hare Krishna. I think your voice, you have you muted yourself or what?
Sorry, Prabhu.
We couldn't hear you. We just lost you.
Yes, I got a call. Sorry. So Prabhupada was continuously writing Srimad Bhagavatam, though the things were happening or not happening. So
Correct.
I wanted to know when something is happening according to our plan or not happening according to our plan, what are the things we're supposed to do continuously so that we are maintaining our Krishna consciousness? I mean, we are sustaining in Krishna consciousness as well as trying to progress.
See, the only work that we have been assigned by Prabhupada is to preach. What other work has been assigned to us? Nothing else, right? Everything else is to increase our attraction for Krishna, right? So we chant, we follow the morning program, we read Bhagavatam. The only thing which we need to, the only work that we have is preaching. Everything in this movement is connected to preaching only. There's nothing which is separate from preaching. Why do we worship the deities? So that not only that we get purified, when people come, we dress the deities attractively, so they get attracted to the beauty of Krishna. So like that, everything is connected to preaching. So if we are not able to do something which is connected to preaching, we can still read, hear, chant. These kind of things can always go on. Those are inseparable parts of our life anyway. I don't know if what the exact question was. I mean, I don't know means I heard it, but I don't know if I understood the question fully.
My question is like in other way, if I want to know, like, for example, I'm planning to distribute books, but it is not happening. So should I switch over to something else, or should I keep on trying for some more time by continuously doing my sadhana, as you said, chanting, hearing, and reading?
No, there are many varieties of things that you can do. So you can definitely take up something And when the opportunity comes, you can do book distribution. But definitely take up some service, because the whole purpose of the Hare Krishna mantra, what are we praying? We're praying, "Oh Lord Krishna, oh Srimati Radharani, oh Lord Krishna, please engage me in your service." So when you, yes, please do take up something. I mean, I'm just giving a general rule. I don't know a specific situation, but in general, yeah, we can take up something. And when whatever desires we have, book distribution or whatever, when Krishna provides the opportunity, we can go for it. But until then, we have to do what is needed in your area or whatever. Your senior devotees or the temple president, they may tell you, okay, this is needed for us. This needs to be done. So you can take up something which needs to be done.
Yes, bro. Thank you.
Service is absolute. We may like some particular service, but that does not mean that super service is better than everything else. Service is absolute. So whenever you get an opportunity for service, please take it.
It can be any service. It is not only preaching.
No. Every service in this God is related to preaching. That is the idea, actually. You know, everything is related to preaching only. Supposed to, at least. People may not sometimes connect it to it, or they may look at it without its connection with preaching. But everything is actually connected to preaching. It's a question of consciousness. Why do we do anything at all? You know, I mean, apart from our chanting, reading, why do we do anything at all? It's simply to preach. This is the meaning of saying that this is a mission. The mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We need to have a mission because the Supreme Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, although he's God, but he himself has anxiety. Can you imagine God has anxiety? God has anxiety. What is the anxiety that he has? The conditioned souls in this world are suffering. How shall I relieve them of their suffering? This is the anxiety of God. So apart from our practice of Krishna consciousness, for our personal development of relationship with Krishna, we have to carry out, to alleviate the anxiety, to remove the anxiety of God. And we can remove the anxiety of God only when we preach. So that's why our movement is, everything is configured in such a manner, is geared for preaching, whether we realize it or not. Does that answer your question?
I couldn't understand the last line, Prabhu. Whether we are realizing it or not means whether I'm directly connected, that I'm going and talking to somebody. Doesn't matter whether I'm doing it directly, but by doing something else also, I'm indirectly connected to preaching. Is it my understanding correct?
Correct. For example, let's take for example, what are the cooks doing in a temple? They're just cooking. That's it. Just cooking. But as they say in the secular world, the army runs on its tummy, right? So if there is no food, how can the soldiers fight? So that sense, we should be able to see the connection. I may be cooking. I may not be going and talking to somebody about Krishna. I may be cooking. But what is the cooking doing? It is helping the book distributors go and distribute books, or helping the preachers to go out and preach. So I'm also part of the preaching mission. I'm one participant. Everybody does not mean that everybody has to directly preach, but everybody is linked to the preaching mission. Every activity they're doing, somehow or the other, is linked to preaching. That's what I said, whether we realize it or not. We may not realize how cooking is connected to preaching, but all the activities in the Krishna conscious movement are connected to preaching. That's what I meant by saying that whether we realize it or not.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, you can realize it if you use a little bit of, if you think carefully about it, or if you're still not able to understand, you can always ask people who understand how everything is connected to preaching. And immediately they'll be able to give you an insight. This is how it's connected to preaching.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so we'll move on to that. Our master has not finished his work.
Shall I read, Prabhu?
Yes, Mataji, please go on.
Yes.
Please.
Our master has not finished his work. There was no warning that Srila Prabhupada's health would break down, or if there were, no one heeded it. As he moved from his devotees in San Francisco to his devotees in New York, no one passed any words that Swamiji should slow down. After the 5.5-year jet flight, Prabhupada spoke of a blockading in his ears, but he seemed all right. He didn't rest, but went straight through the festive airport reception into 3 hours of strong lecturing and chanting in the storefront at 26th 2nd Avenue. To his New York disciples, he appeared dazzling and lovable, and by his presence, his glances, and his words, he increased their Krishna consciousness. To them, his advanced age, now nearing 72 years, was but another of his transcendental features. He was their strength, and they never thought to consider his strength. In the temple, speaking from a new dais behind a velvet-covered lectern, Prabhupada said, "In my absence, things have improved. New paintings hung on the freshly painted white walls. Otherwise, it was the same tiny storefront where he had begun his International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He had written them that he wanted to enter the new building on his return, but they had failed, and they had foolishly lost $6,000. But without dwelling on this, Prabhupada made a more important observation. His disciples, despite the physical absence of their spiritual master, had made progress by following his instructions. As he sat looking happily at the freshly painted walls and the bright faces of his disciples, Prabhupada explained how one obtained expertise in Krishna consciousness by submissively following the spiritual master. He gave the example that although an engineer's apprentice may not be expert, if he turns a screw under the direct supervision of the expert engineer, he is acting as an expert. Many of the devotees were relieved to hear this. They knew that giving up material desires was difficult and that they weren't going to become completely pure devotees overnight. Brahmananda had even written a poem stating that if, after many lifetimes, he could chant one round of the Hare Krishna mantra with attention, he would consider this the greatest success. But Prabhupada was explaining that even if they weren't expert in love of Krishna, if they worked under an expert, they were also acting as experts. The next morning, with the fanfare of Prabhupada's arrival past, it became apparent just how dependent the devotees were on their spiritual leader. The attendance was down to the dozen or so regulars, and Prabhupada silently entered the storefront and began to lead the chanting. But when the moment came for the devotees to sing in response, and Prabhupada heard their first chorus, he looked out to them, startled and compassionate. Now he could hear. They were weak, more like croaking than singing. They had deteriorated in his absence. The kirtanas had changed while he had been away. And now he was hearing what the devotees were like, helpless souls croaking without joy or verve. Srila Prabhupada lecture from Chaitanya Charitamrita. When flying from San Francisco, I noticed that the plane was flying above an ocean of clouds. When I came from India by boat, I saw an ocean of water. And on the plane, I saw an ocean of clouds extending as far as you can see. Above the clouds is the sun. But when we come down through the clouds and land, everything in New York is dim and clouded. But the sun is still shining. Those clouds cannot cover the whole world. They cannot even cover the whole United States, which is no more than a speck in the universe. From an airplane, we can see skyscrapers, as very tiny. Similarly, from God's position, all this material nonsense is insignificant. As a living entity, I am very insignificant, and my tendency is to come down. But the sun doesn't have the come down tendency. It is always above the clouds of Maya. A new boy raised his hand. Why is it that one person, one soul, comes to Krishna and another doesn't? Prabhupada replied with another question. Why is one soul in the Bhaveri and another has come to the Krishna temple? He paused, but no one could reply because one wants to be here and the other doesn't. He explained, it is a question of free will. If we use it properly, we can go to Krishna. Otherwise, we will stay down in the material world. Everyone had something to ask Swamiji. Throughout the day, devotees would be in and out of his room, asking practical and philosophical questions. And they took up their old ways of reciprocating with him. Once again, Prabhupada was telling Achyutananda what to cook for lunch and explaining to him that an expert servant learns to anticipate what the master wants even before he asks for it. Satswarupa came in to show Prabhupada the latest typed manuscripts for teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Although there was no difference in Satswarupa's assignment, now that he was face to face with Prabhupada, he realized he had to type and edit more seriously. He asked whether he could resign from his job at the welfare office. Prabhupada said no. Jadurani continued painting in the outer room of Prabhupada's apartment. Casting shyness aside, she asked him many questions about how to paint Krishna. How is Lord Vishnu situated in the heart? She asked. Is he sitting or standing or what? Prabhupada replied, oh, for that you have to meditate for thousands of years. Jadurani stared at him in dismay. Then Prabhupada said, he is standing. And she went off happily to paint. When Jadurani complained of weak health, Prabhupada asked Achyutananda to see that she got milk twice a day. Looking through the window that opened into the outer room, where typing, painting, and sometimes even constructions went on, Prabhupada watched Jadurani one day as she worked on a painting of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtana party. Just as she started to paint, the words of the Mahamantra across the bottom of the painting, Prabhupada called through the window, don't put the Mahamantra there. But you told me to put it there, she said. I have changed my mind. Hare Krishna should not be below Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One by one, Prabhupada saw all his old New York followers. Gargamuni, the temple treasurer, who reported good sales of the Hare Krishna record and incense, Raya Rama, editor of Back to Godhead, who talked about his indigestion, and Rupanuga, who had a good job but was having difficulty convincing his wife about Krishna consciousness. Even Mr. Chuti, the landlord, dropped by with complaints about the boy's behavior. Prabhupada also met Michael Blumert, a newcomer. Michael had been seeing a psychiatrist as a result of devastating drug experiences. When he had begun coming to the temple, his mother and father had thought the Swami another evil force. On meeting Swamiji, however, Mrs. Blumert accepted his authenticity, although her husband remained doubtful. Mr. Blumert, Srila Prabhupada said, your wife is more intelligent. Mr. Blumert said he wanted his son to help the world in a more practical way by becoming a doctor. Prabhupada argued that there were already so many doctors, but still people were suffering. A Krishna conscious person, however, could relieve a person suffering completely. So the work of Krishna consciousness was more valuable. Mr. Blumert was unconvinced, but he agreed to let Michael stay with the devotees and drop going to the psychiatrist. He came to respect the Swami. even though disagreeing with him. With Brahmananda, Prabhupada discussed the urgent problem of obtaining a permanent visa. Prabhupada had repeatedly extended his visa ever since he had entered the country in 1965. Now, immigration officials denied him any further extensions. He didn't want to leave the US, but the only way he would be able to stay would be to get permanent residency. He had applied, but so far with no success. Your government doesn't want me to stay, he had said, so I may have to go back to India. Swamiji's going back to India was a frightening prospect. His disciples had barely been able to accept that he could leave them for preaching elsewhere in the US. If he were to go back to India, they feared they might fall back into the material world. He was sustaining their spiritual life. How could they go on without him? And Prabhupada felt the same way. Brahmananda managed to find a lawyer to delay the proceedings of the immigration office. The threat of deportation passed. Prabhupada spoke of going to Montreal and getting permanent residency there. But his main intention was to stay in America and cultivate what he had begun. Brahmananda reported to Prabhupada about printing the Bhagavad Gita. The manuscript was ready and they were considering the cost and where to print it, even though they didn't have enough money to publish the book themselves. They hadn't seriously attempted the arduous process of finding a publisher, but Prabhupada pushed Brahmananda to do so. The only hope is that I have my books. Brahmananda also talked with Prabhupada about the $6,000 he had lost to Mr. Price. Prabhupada insisted that they prosecute the culprits. He sent Brahmananda to speak with various lawyers and also to tell Mr. Price and Mr. Taylor that His Excellency was back and would take them to court. At that, they relented. Mr. Taylor refunded most of the $5,000 deposit and Mr. Price returned $750 of the $1,000 he had wheedled out of Brahmananda. The legal services had cost more than $1,000, so that was lost. But Prabhupada said that when dealing with a tiger, you can expect to get scratched. In a letter to Kirtanananda in Montreal, Prabhupada described the successful termination of the Price affair. You will be glad to know that I have been able, by grace of Krishna, to recover $4,227 out of the $5,000 gone in the belly of Sir Conman fraud Price.
Prabhupada had a very sick sense of humor. Okay. Please go ahead, Madhu.
Yes. There were signs that Prabhupada should be cautious about his health. He had gone through difficulty while appearing on the Alan Burke TV show. Alan Burke was known for sitting back.
Alan Burke.
Okay. Alan Burke was known for sitting back, smoking a cigar, and saying outrageous, even insulting things to his guests. And if a guest became offended, Mr. Burke would provoke him all the more. It was a popular show. Before they went on the air, Mr. Burke had asked Prabhupada's permission to smoke a cigar, and Prabhupada had graciously consented. Mr. Burke had introduced his guest as a real Swami. When he had asked Prabhupada why he was against sex, Prabhupada had said he wasn't. Sex should be restricted to marriage for raising Krishna-conscious children. But Mr. Burke had persisted, wanting to know what was wrong with sex outside of marriage. The real purpose of human life, Srila Prabhupada had replied, was self-realization. When one's mind is preoccupied with capturing new sex partners, keeping the mental peace necessary for self-realization becomes impossible. Mr. Burke had agreed. In fact, his manners had been the best ever. And at the end, he had called Prabhupada a very charming gentleman. It was on his way home to the temple that Srila Prabhupada had said that the TV lights had caused him so much pain in his head that at one point he had thought he would not be able to continue. Then one day, Rupanuga, sitting close to Prabhupada's dais during a lecture, noticed Prabhupada's hand shaking as he spoke. Kirtanananda had been there when months ago, the morning after they had made the record, Prabhupada had slept late and complained of his heart skipping and of not being able to move. If I ever get badly sick, Srila Prabhupada had told Kirtanananda, don't call a doctor. Don't take me to a hospital. Just give me my beads and chant Hare Krishna. Swamiji's disciples were reluctant to restrain him. Kirtananda had tried. At the Avalon, when Swamiji had been dancing and jumping and streaming with perspiration, Kirtanananda had insisted that the Kirtana stop, but the others had called him paranoid. Besides, Swamiji didn't like to be restrained. And who were they to restrain him? He was Krishna's empowered representative, able to surmount any difficulty. He was a pure devotee. He could do anything. Hadn't he often described how a pure devotee is transcendental to material pangs? Swamiji had written a letter consoling a disciple's aging grandmother. All our ailments are due to the external body. Although we have to suffer sometimes from bodily inconveniences, especially in the old age, still if we are God conscious, we shall not feel the pangs. The best thing is therefore to chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. The devotees figured that although Swamiji might give good instructions to someone's old grandmother, nothing like what had befallen her was ever going to affect him. Of course, he referred to himself as an old man, but that was mostly in lectures to show the inevitability of old age. To the devotees, Prabhupada's health appeared strong. His eyes shone brightly with spiritual emotions. His complexion was smooth and golden, and his smile was a display of health and well-being. One time, one of the boys said that Swamiji's smile was so virile that it made him think of a bull and iron nails. Swamiji was taking cold showers, going on early morning walks around the Lower East Side, playing mridanga, eating well. Even if his disciples wanted to slow him down, who could they do? Sorry, what could they do? Some of his disciples had actually tried to prevent him from attending the controversial cosmic Lavin at the East Village Theatre, but not because of his health. They had wanted to protect his US residency case. Srila Prabhupada had been invited to attend the Lavin, a fundraising show for Louis Ebolefia, the Love and Peace presidential candidate. Allen Ginsberg, Timothy Leary, and others were attending, along with a full lineup of rock bands. But when Prabhupada's lawyer heard that he was going, he said it might jeopardize the visa case. Some of the boys took up the lawyer's opinion and opposed Prabhupada's plan. Prabhupada agreed that it might be best if he didn't go, but on the day of the cosmic Lavin, he changed his mind and decided to go anyway. I came to this country to preach Krishna consciousness, he declared. Now it was time to speak against these LSD leaders who claimed to be spiritualists. He had been saying that although he wanted to go, he wouldn't go if his disciples forbade him. But in the end, he simply said he was going, and that was that.
Yeah, but
During
you stop there.
Yes.
You stop there.
Yes.
For suspense, let's stop at this point. The Prabhupada's episode starts with the next paragraph. Okay. One thing that I noticed in this whole section that we read so far was how the personal presence of the pure devotee is a huge contributing factor in one's enthusiasm. that does not mean that those of us who do not have the opportunity to be in his physical presence are lacking something, because that same thing is there, it's stored in the form of his books. But during Prabhupada's physical presence, we could see that how when he left New York and went to San Francisco, and when he came back to New York, it was not the same as he left. So Prabhupada's personal presence, his bhakti shakti, would infuse his followers. I was reading, as I said, I was hearing this, following Srila Prabhupada, watching this, following Srila Prabhupada. So there is one Mataji, I forget the name, but during Randan Rath Yatra, Prabhupada is quite sick, and he comes, but still he comes and attends Randan Rath Yatra. He walks all the way, I think it's 1972. Anyway, I'm not sure, right? 72 or 73. So when he walks the entire Rath route, he also dances. At one point, this Mataji just felt the hairs on her body standing on end. And she didn't know why it happened. When she turned back, she saw the Prabhupada was behind her, not right behind her, but behind her. And she was saying that how just by Prabhupada's presence, the hairs on one's body would stand on end, even though she had not even noticed Prabhupada. So that is the special prerogative of being in the presence of the unique, that's a unique prerogative of being in the presence of a pure devotee of the Lord, that that bhakti shakti can easily infuse you. Otherwise, you have to make an effort. Here, without your effort, just by your being there, you can get infused with Prabhupada's bhakti shakti. And here, one more thing that I noticed was that Prabhupada, if you notice that here about, I mean, he could actually jeopardize his whole thing by going to that Lavin. But then Prabhupada remembers or keeps that as a forefront. I've come here to preach. So Prabhupada is bold to take a risk. I will not stop preaching for the sake of some visa which he has not yet got. Okay. Any thoughts, questions, reflections? Now, that does not mean that because Prabhupada did that, so therefore everybody should act exactly the same manner in which Prabhupada acted in regard to that visa. Because Prabhupada is a pure devotee, he knows exactly what to do. Because there are times when he acted differently also, which we'll encounter later on. So it's not that we take one incident from Prabhupada and just take that as the standard template. Prabhupada once gave the example of a horse with a watermelon which is stuck in its throat. So there is a lump in a horse's throat. So the owner of the horse took the horse to a doctor. The doctor took a hammer and smashed the neck of the horse, and the watermelon got dislodged and went inside its stomach. So then the horse became okay. And the next time the horse had a problem, the owner himself directly decided to hit the horse, not the same horse, another horse, decided to hit the horse with a hammer, and this time the horse died. So Prabhupada knows exactly what is the right thing to do, and therefore he does things because he receives dictation from Krishna directly. We may not be on that level, so we should be more careful, not just to pick an incident from Prabhupada and just blindly apply it. For example, for example, here Prabhupada is risking his visa to go out and preach because Krishna dictated to him to go out and preach. For us, it may not be as black and white as that. So we should be more careful. We should depend on the advice of other senior Vaishnavas, and in the absence of that, we should carefully pray to the Supreme Lord to give us guidance and direction. Shailesh, bro, looks like there's no one else who wants to ask a question or say something. You can go ahead.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you. Just give me a second. I'll just I've got two devices running, so you get echo. Give me a second. Can you hear me now?
Yes, bro.
Okay, thank you. So firstly, my sincere apologies. Whatever I say is by no ways, in any way, shape or form, trying to minimize anything what you said. But I just I have a slight view on. Firstly, Prabhupada's mission is primarily to preach, but foremost to develop our achar, after which we can do prachar. I think it is there for us to develop our Krishna consciousness as a primary objective, with the secondary and objective for us to be sufficiently trained in order to preach. Because if we haven't changed in our achar, our prachar is of no value. Prachar on its own, without the achar having changed, does not benefit as many people as it should, because we become hypocritical. So I think our prachar is there, but we have to have developed our achar. So therefore, the objective of the mission is to turn us into devotees primarily, after which the preaching comes naturally and automatically as a repercussion of us becoming devotees and wanting to spread the mercy. So I think Prabhupada wanted the primary, I think, this is my complete personal, I'm not talking from any sastra or anything.
I think I understand the sense in which you're talking, but since Prabhupada himself did not use expressions like primary and secondary, neither does Lord Chaitanya in the in his instructions to Sanatana Goswami. He says there are two kinds of devotees: one who practice and one who preaches. And he says the best among them is one who both practices and preaches. So I would say both are important, but without practice, one cannot preach properly. So
yes, well, I probably the words of primary and secondary are probably superfluous. I didn't mean that, but what I meant to say was that there is a fundamental objective of developing devotees, and sorry.
I would look at it as an interdependent thing, rather than as primary and secondary. Like, for example, if you practice nicely, you will be able to preach nicely. If you preach nicely, you will be able to practice nicely. So sometimes if somebody is not able to practice properly, they may just go out and if they just try to repeat Prabhupada's words, that will enthuse them to practice properly also. It works both ways. So if you practice nicely, it will inspire you to preach.
Yes,
but
I mean there's a
yeah, you go. Suppose you're not practicing, but somehow or the other, if you take out some books and go and distribute the books, you feel enthused to chant. So I mean, it works. It is a double reinforcement. But as Prabhupada said, purity is the force. So if we don't practice, then we will not be able to preach effectively.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I mean, there's a very famous Christian saint who once said that one should preach all day long, and when required, one should speak. Meaning, our actions are the form of preaching. Our behavior is a form of preaching. All day long, we should be exemplary in everything we do. And if required, we should speak in terms of preaching. If preaching is not necessarily a verbal process. Preaching is a demonstrative process of practice.
Yeah. See, sometimes it all depends on the attitude. Like, for example, if someone wants to, someone is okay due to various reasons, not chanting, not doing something, in Krishna consciousness, in their personal lives. But if they have the mood, okay, I understand this is right. Prabhupada came to save the whole world. Let me help Prabhupada. Let me just take out some books and books and go and distribute them. Or let me say a few things good about Krishna consciousness to some others. That itself will be recognized by Krishna. It depends on the attitude, actually. So if people think, if people minimize the value of practice and then try to preach, or ignore the value of practice and then just try to preach, that is what is counterproductive. Not counterproductive. That, I mean, I would say counterproductive. That is not what is desirable. But if someone is not able to do it and knows out of some, okay, due to association, I'm not chanting, or due to whatever, I'm carried away by Maya, but let me do something, whatever I can. And if they do some preaching, then definitely their practice also will go up. So in that sense, that's why I'm reluctant to use the word primary and secondary, because if one has the right mood, one thing will uplift the other, like that.
Yes, they're interdependent. That was my mistake in the terminology I used, so forgive me. So second area, if you're still up for a few more minutes.
Yeah, please, Prabhu, we have time. Why not?
So second area of my foolishness being spoken out by my verbalization. They say, Prabhupada said a fool is only real when he opens his mouth, and I open my mouth too often. So,
but your concept are never foolish.
That doesn't stop me being foolish.
So even so that's a part of our process, right? The words may be irregularly composed. Doesn't matter. The content is important.
Okay. So the message you gave about devotee should not get bogged down in planning. I understand the gist of that, absolutely, because ultimately Krishna's plans are the only plans that are going to be effective. Everything else is a waste of time. But on the other hand, Prabhupada was a pure devotee. Krishna could speak to him in his mind, in his heart, could show him. Most of us, or at least for me, so fallen that Krishna doesn't speak to me directly. He does, but you foolishly don't really understand what the messages he's giving you, the signals he give you. So there's a famous management school of thought saying you fail to plan and you should plan to fail. I see quite often devotees using this as a license to be lazy by not planning basic things, not using intelligence and saying, oh, that was Krishna's plan. Actually, no, sometimes it's our foolishness that results in things. We should have, I think, this is again me just speaking, so forgive me, my foolishness. We should have the endeavor, our plan should be to please Krishna. And we should plan according to what we think would please Krishna and try and execute that. Now, we shouldn't be dependent on the results. That is up to Krishna. If that goes to pot, that's Krishna's desire. We should see that and let that be adjusted, because ultimately everything that happens is Krishna. But for us to emulate a pure devotee would be a mistake to say we don't need to plan, I think, because without that, organizations fall apart. We see people's laziness being used as a license for people's laziness, not to actually try and plan a little forward. If without a little bit forward planning, things do fall apart, even in an organization like ours, and especially in an organization like ours. So I that's my completely personal, foolish view.
No. I think what you're talking makes sense, full sense. That's why I was saying, I just said that in terms of, like, for example, let's say you need to organize a Janmashtami festival. You need to plan for it. How many people are you expecting? How to have volunteers? What about security? All these things have to be done. So when I say planning, I'm referring to something in the future which you desire to do. There is no, for example, let's say, there should be something which is connecting to that. If there's nothing which is connecting to that, and we just desire, like, for example, Prabhupada wanted to build a Vedic city. But when did he want to build a Vedic city? When he got land in Mayapur. Before they didn't speak about let's build a Vedic city in Mayapur, right? So there should be something which connects to a plan, not just plan. Okay, like, for example, that was my essential point, that If there is something which connects to it, okay, build on something that you have rather than imagine one day I will buy a land and one day we'll make some plan. And I mean, it's just quite often there is nothing. So, I mean, I've seen the other thing with devotee that quite often there's nothing. There's no connecting element, but they just plan. Okay, in 5 years from now, I'm going to do this. What does it even mean? I mean, there are so many things in between that first year, second year, third year, fourth year. How do you even know that fifth year you'll be doing like this? So that is what I was referring to. There should be a connecting element. If there's no connecting element, that is where the problem comes up. Like, for example, to organize a Janmashtami program, if you don't have any funds, okay, you need to plan, okay, I need to collect some funds. You need to have a venue. You need to have devotees. If you don't have devotees, what are you going to do about it? I mean, this is just, what do you call it, something that is possible. How it is going to be realized is the question. Is it possible to organize Janmashtami celebration with just one person? Yes, it is possible. I mean, you alone, can you do it? Yes. What is the scale of the planning? That's a different thing. Okay, how much works, what is practical and all that. So, but there is something which is possible, right, in the first place. So that's why I said there should be some connecting element. If there's no connecting element, it is just pie in the sky, as they say, right? Quite often, okay, for example, let's say we have money. So Rupa Goswami has given us a formula. Can you set aside 50% for Krishna consciousness? Hey, that's a detail, because previously the people did not have to pay rents and all these things. Okay, but the principle of it, out of that 25% which I'm supposed to set aside for family emergencies or personal emergencies, how am I going to use that? Am I going to put it in a fixed deposit in India, they say, or is it going to be in some mutual fund, or where is it going to be? So that's a legitimate question. So think and do things accordingly. But there should be some connecting element. First of all, I need to have money. Without even having money, one day I will learn and then do like this. Without a connecting element, what is the use of thinking about it? That was my point. I don't know if I've made it sufficiently clear. There should be something which takes you there. Already something should exist, which you work on that and you improvise on that. That's what I was trying to say.
Yes, Prabhuji. Sorry, apologies once again. I didn't mean to.
I don't know if I'm sufficiently clear, because this topic has come up even in the past, not with you, but other people. I don't know whether, because it sometimes becomes very vague what it means. So this time I use the expression connecting element. I don't know sufficiently clear or not what I mean, what I conveyed.
Yes, I'll give you an example. I mean, for instance, at an early age, I planned to take Vanaprastha by 50 many years ago. That's okay. A long-term plan, not knowing how I was going to get there at an early stage in my life. But I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Now, that was a foolish plan, because I didn't know how I was going to get there. But you needed it in order to know that that is my goal. That is the goal I want to achieve. I didn't achieve it for 5 or 6 years after I set out my goal. For Krishna's plans were different, and he had other things in mind, and there were other issues, and all sorts of other things came into play. But one had to have at least an objective and an overriding plan in order to how to get there. But I fully get your point as to where you're coming from as well. Probably I wasn't debating for the sake of it, but I'm saying we shouldn't take it lightly that we don't need a plan, because I think we should.
I got it. Yeah, I see. But there, in that case of the 50 years, what is the connecting element there? The connecting element is the children, right? That is the children. So suppose you have a daughter who, when you're 50, she's only 8 years old. Obviously, you cannot take. I'm just randomly, not talking about you, randomly giving an example there. So there has to be some connecting elements. There, the connecting element is obviously children. Without children being sufficiently grown up, no one can retire, right? So, or of course, the question may come up whether one has enough money or not. Why does one have? I mean, traditionally, they never thought about all these things, whether they have enough money or not. Vanaprastha is Vanaprastha, that's it. But the real factor, if you look at it from the Bhagavatam and other scriptures, it always speaks about children being grown up and being able to handle the household, right? So it is wrong. I mean, what is it? It is nothing. It's not wrong to plan to exit at 50. So that means if you need to exit by 50, you need to have children who are born at least by the time you're 30. If they're not born by the time you're 30, then the chance of having Vanaprastha at 50, yeah, it's slim. It's slim, you know. So 20 years ago, you already know that the chances are slim. So that's okay. I mean, because you know, I mean, so you can't plan differently from that reality. The connecting reality is the children, the age of the children when you are 30, for example. So the 20-year plan depends on how many children you have and what is their age when you are 30.
Thank you, Prabhu. I'm out. Thank you.
But
No, that's me done. Defeated. Thank you.
yeah, I mean, so generally what I'm saying is that any plan that we make, there should be some connecting element which is connected to that final plan, which can unfold, which can manifest your final plan. If the connecting element itself doesn't exist, then what is the use of any plan? It becomes vague. That was that point that I was trying to make. I mean, this is a good example because it gives a certain specific, I mean, if you want to retire at 50, what do you need? The most important thing is children have to be grown up. Unless somehow by Krishna's will, the couple don't have children. But if they have children when the man has children when he's 35 or 40, how is it possible to take Vanaprastha at 50? It's not possible. No amount of planning will help there. So I think the conclusion in my mind is there's nothing wrong whether it's a 10-year plan or a 20-year plan in that sense. But there has to be some connecting element. Not all the details in the plan. It's not that, okay, 10 years down, I will do this, provided there is some proper connecting element to it, you know. Otherwise, it's just planning and planning and planning. If the connecting element is there, then it makes sense.
Yes, Prabhu, that's where my starting point was, that the connecting element should be to please Krishna and to have the ingredients within the plan to ensure that everything you're doing ends up pleasing Krishna.
Yeah, that's definitely good. Yes, yes. I mean, in fact, it's very good to plan like this. Like, for example, because Shastra is saying, giving you already a plan, right? You had exit at 50. Then you would think, okay, look, if I had exit at 50, if I need to get married, I better get married early so that my children are grown up by the time they're 50, by the time I'm 50. Right? So that's a long-term plan given by Shastra itself, which we can directly adopt and follow all the different elements of the plan, and that's it. Then we can exit. I would say it's a pre-made plan. Huh? What do you call that? Yeah. Where we had to fit in some elements there together, right? Any other questions, thoughts, reflections?
If there's nobody else, I just had a clarification. I missed a little bit because we had a bad connection between where there was where Prabhupada was in what we read earlier. There was a session where he had a lot of I think was it a university that was preaching, and there was a lot of uproar and a lot of shouting going on. I didn't quite get the context of what the
Stanford University.
Stanford. What was the argument against? It was a Vietnam War or something. Was it? I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah, it was about the war, and Prabhupada said that you have elected your government. How can you complain? About drafting, actually, it's about draft. From what I remember, it was about draft. I'll just read out to you. I mean, it's just right here. Yeah, draft. It was about draft. Prabhupada replied that since they had elected their own government, there is no use of complaining if the government told them to go to war. Because you chose your government. So why you complain now when the government is asking you to go to war? That is Prabhupada's point. Draft, yeah, for the Vietnam War. Military draft.
Thank you. That was the only clarification. I couldn't hear what the argument was.
Okay, so we'll stop for today and we'll resume next Sunday. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhuvevacha paritranam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu, for a wonderful class.